This Week with Bob Mueller on News 2.
This week,
as of 12:01 a.m., the Eddie Conrad Act is state law. The law increases the penalty for someone under the age of 18 caught texting and driving, or driving distracted.
a new year brings new laws to Tennessee.
When things go wrong, we have to allow the doctors to be able to treat them.
I fully support the law that we have on the books right now relative to abortion. I believe life begins at conception and should be protected.
Lawmakers return to the Capitol next week to begin a new legislative session, and it's about more than legislation.
Well, yeah, there's no predicting what can happen in the state legislature these days. What I do know is that Tennesseans, they just want to live their lives. They don't want to have to worry about what the state legislature may or may not do on any given day, or what crazy legislation or unconstitutional legislation we may or may not pass.
The scars from last year's session, expulsion of members, quieting audience members, have not healed.
We had worked well with Nashville and some things fell apart, and I won't get into what happened, but there was a lot of breakdown. And so we're trying to rebuild that.
But maybe a truce in the political feud between Nashville and the GOP-controlled legislature. More in our This Week cover story. Hello again, and welcome to another edition of This Week. State lawmakers return to the Capitol next week, and on the heels of last year's anger-filled session, anything is potentially possible. Potential tweaks to Tennessee's near-total abortion ban are sure to receive a lot of debate.
When things go wrong, we have to allow the doctors to be able to treat the mother, the woman.
Knoxville Senator Richard Briggs has been a doctor for 46 years. After Tennessee's trigger law on abortion went into effect last year, he sponsored a bill for some exceptions before Tennessee Right to Life shut it down. This year, he's back with a new iteration.
What we're looking at this year is to take some of those medical conditions where either the child cannot survive outside the womb, or it's a condition where if the woman is not treated properly, that she could end up unable to have children.
Democrats will certainly play ball with Briggs's bill, though they filed a bill a few weeks ago to make any abortion legal in Tennessee, something they admitted to me is purely symbolic when I asked if they felt like they were filing bills with a realistic chance.
Oh, you said realistic chance.
Senate Democratic Caucus Chairwoman London Lamar has a relationship with maternal health. Last session, she revealed that she had a pregnancy-related stroke at 32 weeks a few years back and lost her first son, Dallas. Now straddled with her 5-month-old Nylan, she's fighting to keep access to abortions at least in emergency situations.
We are putting handcuffs on doctors from being able to do what they're supposed to do, what they took an oath to office to do, and that's protect their patients.
Now, Briggs's issue will be whether he can get enough Republicans on board to see it through, a clear uphill battle.
I fully support the law that we have on the books right now relative to abortion. I believe life begins at conception and should be protected.
Briggs promises there will be safeguards in place to prevent elective abortions, but he says the state shouldn't be forcing an unviable pregnancy.
For the state to say we're going to risk her life, we're going to force her to carry the baby, we're going to force her delivery that could affect her sterility or even affect her life, I think that's wrong.
In Nashville, Chris O'Brien.
Tennessee could become the first state to ban political flags in all public schools. Critics say the measure is aimed at removing LGBTQ pride flags in public schools. But as News 2's Adam Mincer reports, the bill can do much more than that.
Whether in hallways or classrooms, Republican Representative Gino Bolso says these flags don't belong in public schools.
In my district, some constituents and a school board member that were concerned about teachers and counselors displaying the pride flag in different schools as a way of trying to indoctrinate students as to what values that they should possess.
Ahead of the start of the legislative session, the Brentwood lawmaker filed a bill that not only bans pride flags, but any flag that isn't the official U.S. or Tennessee flag from public schools.
The bill obviously is somewhat agnostic with regard to any political views. It simply seeks to remove from the classroom these types of political influences that some use to try to indoctrinate children.
What does an LGBT flag indoctrinate a child into?
Well, I guess it really depends. I mean, it covers a very wide swath, which is really where the problem is. Certainly you're familiar with the Supreme Court's decision in 2015 in the Obergefell case that effectively flattened any state laws that supported traditional marriage and held that the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment requires that all states put same-sex marriage and heterosexual marriage on exactly the same footing. That's one issue that I think that flag represents.
Bolso said he thinks the values children should be taught are from the 1700s.
50 years ago, we had a consensus on what marriage is. We don't have that anymore. 100 years ago, we had a consensus on sexual morality. I don't think we have that anymore. So the values that I think most parents want their children exposed to are the ones that are the ones that were in existence at the time that our country was founded.
A new year means new laws in Tennessee and a new legislative session in a matter of days. As News 2's My Owens reports, as LGBTQ advocates are preparing for the year ahead with some old and new concerns in mind.
As children grow up, many of them find themselves trying to piece together what comes next in life. But sometimes the reality isn't all fun and games.
As someone who used to work a little bit in foster care and has studied the area, and as someone who is LGBTQ identified, it took me by surprise.
Recently, the state of Tennessee joining more than a dozen others in a fight against proposed federal rules meant to protect LGBTQ kids in foster care.
To see that they decided to go forth with an action that was very unprecedented and unnecessary and does more harm than good to such a vulnerable population.
Jace Wilder with the Tennessee Equality Project is talking about the placement rule, part of a Biden administration proposal. It would mandate state child welfare agencies place kids in foster homes, residential treatment centers, or group homes that are free of mistreatment or abuse based on a child's sexual orientation.
Discovering their identity, discovering who they are, while also discovering what it means to be in a family that isn't their biological family.
The Tennessee Equality Project says about 30% of those in foster care identify as being part of the LGBTQ community.
70% of children who are in foster care who are LGBTQ end up going back into group homes because they've been rejected by families. This policy just ensures that that child doesn't have to go through that repetitive and traumatic cycle.
In a letter from Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti, he says the proposed rules are, quote, illegal and, quote, would likely harm rather than help foster youth by furthering increasing the already extensive costs and compliance burdens foster providers must shoulder.
The Tennessee Highway Patrol says distracted driving causes a crash every 51 minutes in Tennessee. Almost 15% of the time, a teenager is involved. But a new law just enacted means the consequences for teens texting and driving get harsher. News 2's Adam Mincer reports.
Everywhere you turn at Conrad Construction, there's Eddie in photos, on hats, and in old newspaper articles. But starting today, Eddie Conrad's name has a new meaning.
This would be almost a closing chapter to Eddie's book.
As of 12:01 a.m., the Eddie Conrad Act is state law, the result of more than 3 years of advocacy.
And if he was going to sacrifice anything, he just sacrificed his life to know that the rest of the family was safe and was going to be okay.
In 2020, Eddie, his wife Jocelyn, and their grandkids were going to lunch. According to Highway Patrol, while waiting to make a left turn, a distracted driver hit Conrad's car from behind, sending the family into oncoming traffic.
He just said that the car's not going to stop behind us, and it just kept getting closer. And he said, that car's not going to stop. He yelled it, and that's the last thing he said.
The law increases the penalty for someone under the age of 18 caught texting and driving, or driving distracted. Before, a first or second offense was a $50 fine at most. Now, if it's a second offense, a teen driver can be charged 7 points on their driving record, high enough that a teen could lose their license if caught.
I'm looking at younger generations who are 9, 10 years old, even younger. Where by the time they get to drive, it'll be safer for them to drive.
A way for Eddie to keep protecting his family and community in death just as he did in life. In Lebanon, Adam Mintzer, News 2.
Now to our This Week cover story. The relationship between cities in Tennessee and the state government, it has been tenuous at best. As Tennessee heads into a new year, leaders are cautiously optimistic that better days are ahead. Here is State Capitol reporter Chris O'Brien with more.
The relationship between Nashville's Metro Council and the state has been bad, but a new mayor has brought some new blood.
Well, I mean, it's a new day. I mean, it really depends on how the governor and the supermajority wants to approach the relationship with the new mayor.
Republican state leaders passed numerous bills aimed at the capital city last year, and nearly all of them have either been overturned or tied up in court because they target just one city, a concept known as home rule. With that in mind, Republican leadership is starting to take aim at other cities alongside Nashville to get around it.
It is our duty, our obligation as the General Assembly to hold our political subdivisions accountable. And when they're not adhering to laws that are passed by the General Assembly, either by the letter or the spirit of laws that are passed, then we have a problem.
There's a bill coming to allow the state to take over control of all major airports in Tennessee. The move comes after it attempted to take over Nashville's before a 3-judge panel intervened and overturned it. That legislation is still tied up in court.
We had worked well with Nashville and some things fell apart, and I won't get into what happened, but there was a lot of breakdown. And so we're trying to rebuild that.
So with there being underlying tension from last year, how do the two sides move forward?
Step aside, let us do what we're doing, because obviously it's working. The tourism is coming here, and we're doing things right in Nashville. Do we have our problems? Of course we do. You know, they're being worked on. Everyone needs to stay in their own lane.
If we don't surprise one another and we have open communication, I think we'll get along great.
In Nashville, Chris O'Brien.
Stay with us. This Week continues in a moment.